The truth is what we have. That's what all of you have here. It starts and it ends. You have the truth, and you cannot be fabricating what people say.
My role is not to share my opinion, but to pass on information.
I think AI has a great potential to destroy journalistic ethics. I also think it is up to us as human beings to figure out how we want to manage that.
Hello and welcome to this WEBJ special looking at a crisis facing journalism. I'm Summer Stokes.
And I'm Nicolette Benz. Today we're going to look at some of the different challenges the industry is facing, from the changing media landscape, credibility in social media, and the future of journalism.
Social media is one of the main ways people get information, but how does it impact our understanding of current events? Our reporter Justin Chen spoke with two professional journalists about the differences between social media news and traditional journalism.
My role is not to share my opinion, but to pass on information.
As technology advances, people are using social medias to receive information. According to a study done by Pew Research Center, in 2022, around 31% of the U.S. adults getting their news from Facebook, and 26% of the people are getting their news on YouTube. As a result, journalists like Bailey Allen sees a lot of downsides when it comes to her job.
Is that everyone can be kind of a reporter, but those reports, so to speak, are not necessarily all verified.
Paula Aben is a news anchor from CBS Boston, and she looks at social media very differently.
Now you find a story that's wrong or disinformation gets knocked down pretty quickly, because there are so many eyeballs coming from so many different directions.
Despite the fast-paced nature of social media, they both see similarities when it comes to the editorial and publication process of the news.
And so no one story ever goes on the air without a consensus in the newsroom that it is worth covering, or that our viewers would get some benefit from it.
Everything needs to be verified by an additional outlet or source.
And for those who are trying to break into the news industry, they advise
accurate is more important than fast.
Nowadays, we are so quick to publish and to air stories that we come across, and it's really easy to accidentally publish or air something that's not true.
Reporting for WEBJ News, I am Justin Chen.
Thank you, Justin. Artificial intelligence is playing an increasingly important role in today's world. It has the potential to reshape the way we consume and produce news. Our reporter Carolyn Winchell is live to tell us more about the impact of AI.
According to a study conducted by the Associated Press, over 73% of journalists or their organizations have already begun using generative AI in the newsroom. Generative AI is defined in the AP study as an AI technology that can generate new content from written prompts using the data it has been trained on.
It's going to become such a fundamental tool, and to be quite honest, the best newsrooms right now are already using AI to generate text.
Paul Niwa is a professor at Emerson College who will be teaching a class on AI in journalism. He explained that AI is an important tool.
If a journalist is not using AI to generate their first draft or to help them understand and analyze the reporting that they have collected, that they're going to be behind.
While this tool continues to become increasingly prevalent, it's important to know that there are ethical concerns.
I have no idea what the scope of those ethical concerns might be.
Allison Butler is a senior lecturer at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. One concern she has is how AI can negatively impact journalists' storytelling abilities.
It gives us a great opportunity for our own selves to be much lazier. And I think one of the best things about solid, hard-hitting investigative journalism is that it's not lazy.
To mitigate these concerns, we as journalists can take steps to work with and learn about AI. Generative AI is a tool, and when journalists learn how to implement it correctly, it can help them to tell better stories. Live in Boston for WEBJ News, I'm Carolyn Winchell.
Thank you, Carolyn. Hey, Nicolette. I know as journalists we tell other people's stories, but have you ever thought about telling our own stories?
It will definitely be an interesting story. Our reporter Drake Skelly talked to a few journalists over the marathon weekend and attended the SPJ New England Conference. He takes us on a tour of how traditional TV reporters do their jobs and support each other.
Runners and spectators from around the world flooded into Boston for the Boston Marathon. All eyes and all cameras were on the finish line as journalists joined the crowds to capture the excitement. Journalists like Providence Channel 6's Caitlin Gelhaus.
We wanted to have an active live scene, right? We don't want to be like against a wall and be like, yeah, the race is over there.
While the marathon may have security, not every scene will, and reporting can be dangerous for journalists, especially for women. Many reporters have discussed being harassed and stalked, so reporters have to remain vigilant.
It's so important to be aware of your surroundings at all times, know where there's an exit, know where there's an escape route.
It may be difficult for young journalists to make their way to an event as imposing as the Boston Marathon. Some may be looking for an environment a little bit more familiar, an environment like a classroom.
Later in the week, journalists from across the Northeast gathered at Emerson College and heard from Leslie Visser.
She said to me, "That's great. Sometimes you have to cross when it says don't walk."
Leslie Visser is one of the most impactful women in sports reporting, and she's disappointed when reporters are dishonest. Some reporters succumb to the pressures of deadlines and make up quotes and reports because they don't believe they'll be caught, such as with Fox Sports reporter Charissa Thompson, who admitted to making up quotes for her sideline reports.
The truth is what we have. That's what all of you have here.
While it can be dangerous for journalists to be at a scene and easy to lie, it's important that the idea of truthful storytelling is always at the forefront. For WEBJ News, I'm Drake Skelly.
With the fast-changing landscape of the media world, journalists need to constantly adjust to evolving technologies, audience preferences, and ethical considerations. Now we go to Justin Chen, who sat down with the journalism department chair at Emerson College, Luann Reeb, for more insight.
Thank you so much. Joining me right now to discuss is Professor Luann Reeb. She is the head of the journalism department here at Emerson College. Professor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
My first question is, you started as a reporter and produce and then become a news director at WBZ and later founded your online media company. Tell me about the experience of, these two different media sites. What are the common things?
So, yes, thank you, Justin, for that introduction. And the crux of that question is that journalism principles are the same. They'll always be the same. Seeking truth, getting facts, telling compelling stories, all the things that we talk about in the classes that you're learning how to do, all of those things, I believe, will always be strong and be the same. What changes is the format and how people consume news and information. So I'm hopeful and optimistic about that.
Yeah, and since you mentioned about format, mentioned about social media, right now we see misinformation all over our medias, and that has certainly impacted the work that's done by traditional media and traditional journalists. What's your take on misinformation on social media could potentially threaten the accuracy in news?
I don't think it threatens what we do as journalists, but it does threaten how people make decisions in their lives as citizens, because everything is global now. And what happens when people read misinformation on social media, often they don't know it's misinformation, right? And so part of our jobs, I think, as journalists, is to point that out. I always taught my kids when they read news on social media, I would ask them questions about what's the source of that information. It's like what we do as journalists, right? We are very focused on including the sources and making sure those sources are accurate.
Right, and we've been discussing misinformation, and right now one of the big element of misinformation is artificial intelligence being used online. Do you concern about how artificial intelligence, making fake images, impacting people's understanding on news?
Somebody said to me the other day that artificial intelligence is really misnamed because it's not human intelligence. It's not a thinking thing, right? It only knows as much as what we put into it. There are good and bad actors using artificial intelligence. I like to think of it as another tool in the world of technology, much like when digital was first introduced to newspapers and broadcast journalism, right? It was scary for a lot of us way back then. Now you know how old I am. To understand that digital was just another technology tool, and the content is really what's important. And quite honestly, I'm not too worried about AI. I think it can be a good tool for even journalists to be able to define huge mountains of data down to a much smaller bit of information, but it always will have that human touch.
So as a journalist, as an educator, what do you think the best advice for students who are in journalism right now to learn to combat misinformation?
I think we need to be relevant. So I think we need to embrace technology. I think we need to experiment with technology. I think learning and maintaining those key principles to seek the truth, verify sources before that information goes out to the public, and to point out publicly when there is misinformation. That's an added responsibility now for journalists to do that. We used to not have to point things out like that, but we do now in global stories, in political stories. I think that has become sort of part of our jobs for the principles of journalism to survive in this crisis. I think we have to take that responsibility to point out to our fellow citizens that this is wrong, this is not accurate, so that they can make their own decisions.
Yeah, news at the end of the day is to serve the public and is to give out accurate information so people can make their decision on their day-to-day life. So certainly keeping an accurate and news media is important. Professor Luann Reed, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Justin.
Back to you at Anchor Desk.
Thanks, Justin. Despite the many challenges and changes that the journalism industry is battling with, young student journalists embrace them with enthusiasm. We go to our reporter Charlotte O'Connor for the story.
Most college students are met with one important question: what to major in. Those who choose journalism must take into consideration the concern over the future of the news and the role of a journalist. But how are these students feeling about the industry they are soon to be a part of? Students like Olivia Vassalou, who studies journalism at Northeastern, are more excited about the future than worried.
Journalism is everywhere. It's in social media, it's in newspapers. That's what I want to do, creating just like concise, effective communication.
In addition to her studies, Olivia is an active member of the Northeastern Broadcasting Club.
We film the Update, it's called, so that's a bi-weekly update of just, it has a local news section, it has something going around Northeastern, it has a movie review, international news.
Other students like Olivia are on a journalism path for similar reasons.
I grew up in a really small town in Connecticut, and I often realized that a lot of people that I grew up with didn't really know what was going on beyond our town bubble. I wanted to get into journalism to give myself a voice to share those things.
These Boston schools where Olivia and Miriam study serve as a place to meet other students who share the same passion for journalism.
We're the next generation of journalists. Journalism that we're doing isn't for us. That's what I really like about the students here, because we do challenge each other to do that.
While the news is a place that frequently experiences change, the future of journalism is supported by the next generation of passionate reporters. For WBJ News, I'm Charlotte O'Connor.
Thank you, Charlotte. Journalists are certainly facing a lot of challenges, but we continue to uphold the principles of truth and integrity.
Yes, from adapting to new technologies to confronting misinformation, we're ready to tackle whatever comes our way.
That's all we have for this WEBJ News Special. I'm Summer Stokes.
And I'm Nicolette Bunce. Have a great rest of your day.